Hello and welcome. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Take a moment to settle into your space. Adjust your pillows, pull your blankets close, and let your body sink deeper into the comfort of your bed. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do. This time is yours. Tonight, we're going to journey together into an old story. A tale that has been told for hundreds of years, passed down through generations, changing slightly with each telling. It's a story of towers and gardens, of patience and hope, of waiting and of finding. Before we begin, let's take 3 slow breaths together. Breathe in slowly through your nose, filling your lungs completely. And now release that breath, letting it carry away any tension from the day. Again, breathe in and out, feeling your shoulders drop and soften. One more time, in and out. Beautiful. As you listen tonight, you might drift in and out of sleep. That's perfectly fine. In fact, that's exactly what should happen. Let the story wash over you like gentle waves. If you wake and find yourself in a different part of the tale, just let yourself float along with wherever we are. This is a story about a girl with impossibly long hair, locked away in a tower with no door. But it's also a story about gardens and seasons, about the small moments that make up a life, about loneliness and connection, and ultimately about finding your way home. So close your eyes if you haven't already, and let's begin. Once upon a time, in a land much like our own, there lived a husband and wife in a modest cottage at the edge of a village. Their home was small but comfortable, with a thatched roof and windows that faced the morning sun. They had lived there for many years, content with their simple life, working their small plot of land and tending to their modest garden. But despite their contentment, there was a sadness that lingered in their hearts. For many years they had hoped for a child, and as time passed, that hope had begun to fade like morning mist under the warming sun. The cottage sat at the very edge of the village, and beyond their small fence began a forest. Not an ordinary forest, but one that seemed older and darker than the woods that surrounded the other sides of the village. The trees there grew thick and close together, their branches intertwining overhead to create a canopy so dense that little sunlight reached the forest floor. At the back of their cottage, there was a small window that looked out over their garden and toward that mysterious forest. And just beyond their property line, separated by a high stone wall covered in climbing ivy and moss, lay another garden. This garden was unlike any other in the village. Even from their window, the couple could see that it was magnificent. Vegetables grew in abundant rows, their leaves deep green and healthy. Herbs filled the air with their fragrance, even from a distance. Flowers bloomed in impossible profusion, colors so vibrant they seemed almost unreal in the fading light of evening. But this garden belonged to an enchantress, a woman whom everyone in the village feared. She lived alone in a grand house that rose up behind the garden walls, and she was rarely seen in the village. When she did appear, people would quickly cross to the other side of the street, their eyes downcast. Children were warned to stay far away from her walls, and no one, absolutely no one, ever entered her garden. The stone wall that surrounded this enchanted garden was tall, perhaps twice the height of a man, and it was ancient. Moss grew thick in the crevices between the stones, and ivy had climbed its surface for so many years that in some places you could barely see the stone beneath. The wall was always cool to the touch, even on the hottest summer days, and it seemed to radiate a kind of silence, as if sound itself was reluctant to cross its boundary. Now it happened one day that the wife discovered she was at last expecting a child. The joy that filled their cottage was like sunlight breaking through clouds after a long storm. The husband could hardly contain his happiness, and he went about his work with a lightness in his step that hadn't been there for years. But as the months passed and the wife grew larger with child, something strange began to happen. She would stand at the window that faced the enchantress's garden, gazing out for hours at a time. Her eyes would fix on one plant in particular, a vegetable that grew in lush abundance near the wall. It was Rapunzel, a plant also called rampion, with delicate purple flowers and leaves that could be eaten in salads. In that enchanted garden, the Rapunzel grew more beautiful and green than any that grew anywhere else. Its leaves seemed to glow with vitality, and even from a distance you could almost taste how crisp and fresh they would be. The wife developed a craving for this Rapunzel that grew stronger with each passing day. At first, it was just a passing thought, a mild desire, but soon it became something more. She would wake in the night thinking of it. She would abandon her meals, unable to eat anything else. The thought of that Rapunzel consumed her entirely. She grew pale and thin, despite carrying a child. Her husband would find her at the window at all hours, her hand pressed against the glass, her eyes fixed on that forbidden garden. "What troubles you, my dear?" he would ask, taking her hand in his. "Tell me what ails you, and I will do anything in my power to help." For many days she said nothing, but her condition worsened. She barely ate, barely slept. Her skin took on a pallor that frightened her husband terribly. Finally, one evening, as the sun was setting and the garden beyond the wall seemed to glow in the golden light, she spoke. "I must have some of that Rapunzel," she whispered, her voice weak. "The Rapunzel that grows in the garden beyond our wall. If I cannot have it, I fear I will die, and our child with me." The husband felt his heart grow cold with fear. He knew whose garden that was. He knew the stories, the warnings, the reputation of the woman who tended it. But when he looked at his wife, so pale and fragile, when he thought of losing both her and their long-awaited child, he knew he had no choice. "I will get it for you," he said softly, though his voice trembled as he spoke. "I promise you, I will bring you that Rapunzel." That very night, as darkness fell and the village grew quiet, the husband prepared himself for his task. He waited until the moon had risen, a silver crescent in the dark sky, and then he quietly left their cottage. The night air was cool against his skin as he approached the wall. His heart hammered in his chest so loudly he was certain it could be heard for miles around. The stone wall loomed before him, dark and imposing in the moonlight. The ivy that covered it rustled softly in the night breeze, whispering sounds that might have been words of warning. He found a place where the ivy grew thick and strong, and using it as a ladder, he slowly, carefully climbed up and over the wall. His hands shook as they gripped the vines. His breath came in short, shallow gasps. But the thought of his wife, growing weaker by the day, gave him courage. When he reached the top of the wall, he paused for a moment, looking down into the garden below. In the moonlight, it looked even more magical than it did by day. The plants seemed to shimmer with an inner light. The air was thick with the scent of growing things, rich and earthy and impossibly sweet. He lowered himself down into the garden, his feet touching the soft earth with barely a sound. For a moment, he stood perfectly still, listening. The garden was silent except for the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of a night bird. Moving as quickly and quietly as he could, he found the Rapunzel plants. They grew in abundant rows, their leaves broad and healthy. He selected the finest specimens he could find, pulling them gently from the earth and tucking them into the bag he had brought. The leaves felt cool and smooth in his hands, and even in the darkness, he could see how green and vital they were. His task complete, he turned to leave, his heart racing with both relief and the urgent need to be gone from this place once more. When he returned to the cottage and presented the Rapunzel to his wife, her transformation was immediate and remarkable. Color returned to her cheeks, her eyes brightened. She prepared the leaves into a salad and ate with an appetite that had been absent for weeks. The husband watched her eat, relief flooding through him. He had done it. He had taken from the enchantress's garden and escaped unharmed. His wife was well again, and all would be right. But the next day, as evening fell, his wife's craving returned. The Rapunzel he had brought was gone, and she wanted more, needed more. She stood at the window again, her face pressed to the glass, and when she looked at her husband, he saw the same desperate hunger in her eyes. "Please," she whispered, "just once more. I must have more of that Rapunzel, or I cannot go on." And so that night, despite his fear, despite his better judgment, the husband once again climbed the wall and entered the enchanted garden. The moon was brighter this second night, nearly full, and it cast the garden in sharp relief. Shadows were deeper, and the plants seemed to move in ways that had nothing to do with the breeze. But the husband pushed these thoughts aside and moved quickly to the Rapunzel plants. He was just pulling the last plant from the earth when he felt a presence behind him. The air seemed to grow colder, the night sounds of the garden fell silent, and a voice, sharp and terrible, cut through the darkness. "How dare you?" The husband turned slowly, his blood turning to ice in his veins. There, standing in the moonlight, was the enchantress. She was tall and imposing, dressed in robes that seemed to be made of shadow itself. Her eyes glowed with an inner light, and her face, though beautiful in a terrible way, was twisted with rage. "How dare you enter my garden?" she continued, her voice low and dangerous. "How dare you steal what is mine? Do you know who I am? Do you know what I could do to you for this transgression?" The husband fell to his knees, the Rapunzel plants scattering from his trembling hands onto the dark earth. "Please," he gasped, "please, I meant no harm. My wife, she is with child, and she craves the Rapunzel from your garden. She has grown so ill that I feared for her life and for the life of our child. I took it out of desperation, out of love. Please, I beg your mercy." The enchantress looked down at him, and for a long moment she said nothing. The garden seemed to hold its breath. Then slowly her expression changed. The rage faded, replaced by something colder, more calculating. "Your wife craves my Rapunzel," she said slowly. "Very well, you may take all the Rapunzel you wish. Take as much as she desires. I will not prevent you." The husband's heart leaped with hope, but it was short-lived. "However," the enchantress continued, and her voice now had the quality of silk over steel, "when your child is born, you will give it to me. The child will be mine, to raise as I see fit. This is the price for the Rapunzel. Do you agree?" The husband felt as though the ground had opened beneath him. "No," he whispered, "please, anything but that. I will give you anything, anything at all, but not our child. We have waited so long." "Then your wife will die," the enchantress said simply, "and the child with her. The choice is yours. Make it now." And what choice did he have? What choice does anyone have when faced with losing everything? With a heavy heart that felt as though it might break apart in his chest, the husband lowered his head and whispered, "I agree." "Swear it," the enchantress commanded. "I swear it," the husband said, and with those words he felt as though he had sealed all their fates. The enchantress smiled then, a cold smile that held no warmth. "Then take your Rapunzel and go, and remember your promise. When the child is born, I will come to claim what is mine." The husband gathered up the Rapunzel with shaking hands and fled from the garden. He climbed the wall one final time, his mind numb with horror at what he had promised. When he reached home, he gave the Rapunzel to his wife without telling her of the bargain he had made. How could he? How could he tell her that in saving her life and the life of their child, he had promised to give that child away? The wife ate the Rapunzel, her health restored once more, and the husband said nothing. He hoped, in the desperate way that people hope when they have no other choice, that perhaps the enchantress would forget, that perhaps, when the time came, she would show mercy. But deep in his heart, he knew better. The months passed, and the wife's belly grew round and full. The husband watched over her with tender care, treasuring each day, each moment, knowing that their time together as a family would be brief. And then, on a night when the moon was dark and the wind howled around their cottage, the wife gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. The baby was perfect. She had eyes as blue as the summer sky and hair that was pale gold, soft as silk. When she cried, her voice was strong and healthy. The wife held her close, tears of joy streaming down her face, while the husband stood beside them, his own tears mingling joy and sorrow in equal measure. They only had a few hours together, that small family, just a few hours to hold their daughter, to whisper promises they knew they could not keep, to memorize every detail of her tiny face. And then, just as the first light of dawn began to touch the windows, there came a knock at the door. The husband's hands trembled as he opened it. The enchantress stood on the threshold, and without a word, she stepped into the cottage. She moved to where the wife lay with the baby, and she looked down at the child with an expression that might have been satisfaction. "A beautiful child," she said softly. "She will do very well indeed." The wife clutched the baby tighter, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "What do you mean? Who are you?" But the enchantress simply reached down and took the baby from her arms. The wife cried out, reaching for her child, but the husband held her back, his face wet with tears. "Our bargain," he whispered to his wife. "The Rapunzel. I had to promise." The wife's cry of anguish filled the cottage, a sound of pure heartbreak that seemed to shake the very walls. But the enchantress was already at the threshold, the baby held securely in her arms. She paused at the threshold and turned back. "I will call her Rapunzel, and I will care for her as if she were my own. That is all the comfort I can offer you." And then she was gone, disappearing into the early morning mist, taking with her the child that the couple had waited so long to have. The enchantress took the baby Rapunzel back to her house beyond the wall, to that place of magic and growing things. And true to her word, she cared for the child. She fed her and clothed her, kept her warm and safe. As Rapunzel grew from an infant to a toddler to a young girl, The enchantress provided her with everything she needed. But love? That was something the enchantress could not provide, for her heart had long ago grown cold and hard. Rapunzel grew to be the most beautiful child anyone had ever seen. Her hair, which had been pale gold as a baby, grew longer and thicker with each passing year, taking on a deeper, richer color, like spun gold touched with sunlight. Her eyes remained that startling blue, and her face held a sweetness that seemed to light up any room she entered. But there was more to Rapunzel than just beauty. Despite growing up in the care of the enchantress, despite having no other children to play with, no family to love her, Rapunzel developed a kind and gentle spirit. She sang to herself as she went about her days, her voice pure and clear. She spoke kindly to the birds that landed on her windowsill. She cared tenderly for the plants in the enchantress's garden when she was old enough to help with such tasks. The enchantress watched the child grow with a mixture of satisfaction and something else, something she did not care to examine too closely. She had taken Rapunzel to have power over the child's parents, to punish them for their transgression. But the girl herself was blameless, and there were times when the enchantress would hear Rapunzel sinning and feel something almost like regret stir in her chest. Almost, but not quite. When Rapunzel was 12 years old, at that delicate age between childhood and womanhood, the enchantress made a decision. The girl was growing too beautiful, too remarkable. Soon people would begin to notice. Soon someone might try to take her away. The enchantress could not allow this. And so, deep in the forest, far from any village or traveled road, the enchantress used her magic to grow a tower. It was not built by human hands. It simply rose from the earth one night, stone by stone, as if the forest itself were shaping it. It grew tall and straight and smooth, reaching up toward the sky like a finger pointing to the heavens. The tower had no door, no stairs, no way to enter or exit except through the single window at the very top. When it was complete, the enchantress brought Rapunzel to see it. "This will be your new home," she told the girl. Rapunzel looked up at the tower, her young face confused and afraid. "But why?" she asked. "Why must I live in a tower? What have I done wrong?" "You have done nothing wrong," the enchantress replied, and for once there might have been a hint of something like kindness in her voice. "But the world is dangerous and you are precious. In the tower you will be safe. I will visit you every day. You will want for nothing, but you must stay there, where no one can find you, where no harm can come to you." And before Rapunzel could protest further, the enchantress used her magic to transport them both to the top of the tower, to that single room with its single window. The room was round, following the shape of the tower, and it was surprisingly well appointed. There was a comfortable bed with soft blankets, there was a table and a chair, there were books on shelves and a spinning wheel in the corner. The window was large enough to let in plenty of light, and from it Rapunzel could see for miles over the forest below. But there was no door, no way out. "I will come to see you every day," the enchantress said. "When I call to you, you must let down your hair so that I may climb up." And indeed, Rapunzel's hair had grown remarkably long. It fell down her back in a thick golden rope, reaching all the way to the floor and even pooling there. The enchantress had encouraged this growth, had used her knowledge of herbs and magic to help it grow even longer and stronger. "But how will I let it down?" Rapunzel asked, her voice small and frightened. The enchantress showed her. There was a hook fastened securely to the stone beside the window, strong and firmly embedded. "When I call to you, you will wind your hair around this hook and then toss the length of it out the window. I will climb up, and when I reach the top, you will unfasten it from the hook. When I leave, I will climb back down, and then you will pull your hair back up. Do you understand?" Rapunzel nodded, tears streaming down her young face. "Please," she whispered, "please don't leave me here alone." But the enchantress had already wrapped Rapunzel's hair around her hand and was lowering herself out the window. "I will return tomorrow," she called back. "Be brave, child." And then Rapunzel was alone. That first night in the tower was the longest night of Rapunzel's young life. She stood at the window until the sun set, watching the forest grow dark below her. She had never been alone before, not truly alone like this. The silence was overwhelming. When night fell completely and the stars came out, she finally went to her bed and cried herself to sleep. But young people are resilient, and Rapunzel was no exception. When morning came and sunlight streamed through her window, she rose and looked around her new home with fresh eyes. If this was to be her life, she would make the best of it that she could. She explored every inch of her circular room. The bed was comfortable, the blankets soft, the books on the shelves were numerous and varied, and Rapunzel loved to read. The spinning wheel was well made, and there was wool provided for her to spin. At the table, she found materials for drawing and painting. And true to her word, the enchantress came that day. Rapunzel heard her voice from below, calling up to the window, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." It took several attempts for Rapunzel to get it right. Her hair was so long and so heavy, but finally she managed to wind it securely around the hook and toss the length of it out the window. She felt the weight as the enchantress began to climb, hand over hand, using Rapunzel's hair as a rope. It didn't hurt exactly, but it was uncomfortable. Rapunzel braced herself against the stone wall, feeling each tug and pull as the enchantress ascended. Finally, the woman's head appeared at the window, and then she was climbing inside. The enchantress brought food, fresh bread and cheese and fruit. She brought new books, new wool for spinning. She stayed for an hour, asking Rapunzel how she had spent her time, making sure she had everything she needed. And then she left, climbing back down Rapunzel's hair, leaving the girl alone once more. This became the pattern of Rapunzel's days. Each morning, the enchantress would come, bringing supplies and staying for a brief visit. The rest of the time, Rapunzel was alone with her books, her spinning wheel, and her thoughts. The years passed slowly in the tower. Rapunzel grew from a girl of 12 to a young woman of 18. Her hair grew longer and longer until it was 20 ells long, an impossibly thick rope of gold that she had to coil carefully around the room when it wasn't wound around the hook. She learned to occupy her time. She read every book on her shelves many times over. She became skilled at spinning, creating threads so fine and even that it was almost like silk. She taught herself to draw and paint, capturing on paper the views from her window, the birds that came to visit, the changing seasons in the forest below. And she sang. Oh, how she sang! With no one to hear her except the birds and the wind, Rapunzel would sing for hours, her voice growing stronger and more beautiful with each passing year. She sang to keep herself company, to fill the silence, to remind herself that she was still alive, still real, still here. Sometimes, when the loneliness became too much to bear, she would stand at the window and look out over the forest, wondering what lay beyond those trees. She wondered about the village she dimly remembered from her childhood. She wondered if there were other people out there, people her own age, people who might be friends if she ever had the chance to meet them. But mostly she tried not to think too much. Thinking led to sadness, and sadness led to despair. Better to focus on the day at hand, on the task before her, on the small pleasures available to her. the warmth of the sun through her window, the song of a bird, the satisfaction of a perfectly spun thread. The enchantress continued her daily visits. Over the years, she had grown older, her hair turning gray, her movements slower, but she never failed to come. Sometimes Rapunzel thought she saw something in the old woman's eyes, some hint of regret or sorrow. But if it was there, the enchantress never acknowledged it, and Rapunzel never asked. One day, the enchantress brought Rapunzel a gift, a beautiful comb made of silver, decorated with tiny flowers. "For your hair," she said simply. "It has grown so long and beautiful, you should have something lovely to care for it with." Rapunzel accepted the gift with surprise and gratitude. It was the first truly personal gift the enchantress had ever given her, and despite everything, despite the tower and the isolation and the years of loneliness, Rapunzel was touched. "Thank you," she said softly, running her fingers over the intricate design. "It's beautiful." The enchantress nodded and left shortly after, as she always did. But Rapunzel kept the comb close and used it every day, carefully working through her impossibly long hair, section by section, until it shone like spun gold in the sunlight. The seasons continued their endless cycle. Spring brought new leaves to the trees and nesting birds to the nearby branches. Summer filled the forest with green abundance and long, warm days. Autumn painted the world in gold and crimson, and the air turned crisp and cool. Winter brought snow that transformed the forest into a silent white wonderland, and Rapunzel would watch the snowflakes fall, each one unique and beautiful, and gone so quickly. 18 years Rapunzel had lived when our story truly begins. 18 years in the tower, watching the world from her window, singing her songs to the empty air, combing her golden hair, and waiting, though she didn't know for what. And then, one day, something changed. It happened on a day in early spring, when the forest was just beginning to wake from its winter sleep. New buds were appearing on the trees, and the air held the promise of warmth to come. Rapunzel was at her window, as she often was, looking out over the forest and singing softly to herself. Her voice carried far on the still air, floating down from the tower and through the trees, a sound so pure and sweet that it seemed almost otherworldly. And on this particular day, someone heard it. A young prince was riding through the forest, returning from a visit to a neighboring kingdom. He had taken a path that led him far from the main roads, preferring the quiet beauty of the deep woods to the busy highways. His horse moved slowly beneath him, picking its way carefully through the undergrowth. When the song reached his ears, the prince pulled his horse to a stop, listening intently. Never in his life had he heard anything so beautiful. The voice seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, echoing softly through the trees. It pulled at something deep in his chest, filling him with a longing he couldn't name. He urged his horse forward, following the sound. The singing continued, rising and falling in a melody that was both joyful and heartbreakingly sad. The prince moved through the forest as quietly as he could, not wanting to disturb the singer, wanting only to find the source of this incredible voice. And then, through the trees ahead, he saw it. The tower. It rose up from the forest floor like something from a dream, tall and impossibly smooth, with no door that he could see. At the very top there was a single window, and from that window the song continued to pour forth. The prince dismounted and approached the tower on foot. He circled it completely, running his hands over the smooth stone, searching for any way to enter. But there was nothing. No door, no handholds, no way up. He stepped back and looked up at the window, shading his eyes against the afternoon sun. He could see movement there, a shadow of someone, but nothing more. "Hello," he called up. "Hello up there." Immediately, the singing stopped. There was a moment of silence, and then a face appeared at the window. Even from this distance, the prince could see that she was beautiful. Hair like gold framed a face that was both delicate and strong, and her eyes, even from far below, seemed to shine with surprise and wonder. "Who are you?" Rapunzel called down, her voice filled with astonishment. In all her years in the tower, no one had ever come here except the enchantress. The very idea that there was someone else, someone new, someone who had heard her singing was almost too much to believe. "I am a traveler," the prince called back, deciding not to reveal his true identity just yet. "I heard your singing and was drawn to it. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. But how did you come to be in that tower? Is there no way to enter?" "There is no door," Rapunzel replied. "I have lived here for many years, and there is no way in or out except—" She paused, unsure whether she should reveal the secret. "Except what?" the prince prompted gently. Rapunzel hesitated. The enchantress had never forbidden her from speaking to others, perhaps because the enchantress had never imagined anyone would come. And after so many years of loneliness, the chance to speak with someone new, someone kind-sounding, was too tempting to resist. "Except my hair," she finally said, "but I can only let it down for the one who cares for me. I'm sorry." The prince's heart sank with disappointment, but he understood. "I see. Well, I won't trouble you further, but please, would you sing again? Your voice is so beautiful, and it would bring me great joy to hear it once more before I go." Rapunzel felt her heart flutter in her chest. No one had ever asked her to sing like this. The enchantress heard her singing, but had never commented on it, never requested it. This stranger's simple request filled her with a warmth she had never known. Yes, I will sing for you," she said, and she began a new song, one of her favorites, a melody she had created herself over the long years. The prince sat down at the base of the tower, his back against the smooth stone, and listened. He closed his eyes and let the music wash over him, and he felt as though his very soul was being touched by something pure and true. When the song ended, he called up his thanks and reluctantly prepared to leave. But before he mounted his horse, he called up one more time. "May I come back? Tomorrow, perhaps. I would very much like to hear you sing again." Rapunzel's heart leaped. "Yes," she called down, trying to keep the eagerness from her voice. "Yes, please come back. I would like that very much." The prince rode away with a lightness in his heart that surprised him. All the way back to his castle, he thought of nothing but that tower and the beautiful voice that had come from its window. True to his word, he returned the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Each day he would call up to Rapunzel, and they would talk. He told her about the world beyond the forest, about the villages and cities, about the ocean that lay beyond the mountains, about markets and festivals and all the things he had seen in his travels. Rapunzel drank in every word like someone dying of thirst finally finding water. She asked him endless questions, wanting to know about everything. What did the ocean sound like? What did people do at festivals? What were markets like? What did different foods taste like? And the prince answered every question with patience and detail, painting pictures with his words of a world Rapunzel had never known. In turn, Rapunzel told him about her life in the tower. She told him about her books and her spinning, about the birds that visited her window, about the changing seasons as seen from her high vantage point. She told him about her loneliness, about the long days and longer nights, about how she filled her time with small tasks and tried not to think too much about the life she was missing. She did not tell him about the enchantress. something held her back from that. Perhaps it was fear of what might happen if the enchantress learned of these visits. Perhaps it was shame at her situation. But whatever the reason, she kept that part of her story to herself. The prince, for his part, had not revealed his true identity. He was simply a traveler to Rapunzel, and somehow that felt right to both of them. Here, at the tower, titles and stations didn't matter. They were simply two people, talking and growing to know each other. As the days turned to weeks, something began to grow between them. The prince found himself thinking about Rapunzel every moment he was away from the tower. Her voice, her laughter, the way she described the world from her unique perspective, all of it fascinated him. He had met many young women in his life, ladies of the court with their fine dresses and practiced manners, but none of them had touched his heart the way Rapunzel had. And Rapunzel, who had never known anyone except the enchantress, who had spent her entire life in isolation, found herself falling deeply, helplessly in love. One day, after several weeks of these visits, the prince made a decision. He arrived at the tower as usual, but this time he brought something with him, a strong rope, carefully coiled. "Rapunzel," he called up, and when she appeared at the window, her face lighting up as it always did when she saw him, he continued, "I have an idea. I know you cannot let down your hair for me, but what if I sent up a rope? You could pull it up and I could climb it to your window. Then we could speak face to face, properly, not shouting up and down between heaven and earth." Rapunzel's breath caught in her throat. To see him up close? To actually speak with him face to face? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Yes, she said. "Yes, I would like that, but you must promise to tell no one about this place, about me. Promise me." "I promise," the prince said solemnly. "Your secret is safe with me." He attached a small stone to one end of the rope and threw it up toward the window. It took several attempts, but finally Rapunzel caught it. She pulled the rope up, marveling at how much easier this was than when the enchantress climbed her hair. She secured the rope to the hook by her window, the same hook she used for her hair, and then watched as the prince began to climb. Her heart pounded as he ascended. What would he look like up close? What if he was disappointed when he saw her properly? What if she didn't know what to say? But when his head appeared at the window, and then his shoulders, and then he was climbing through into her room, all her fears melted away. He was young, perhaps a few years older than she was, with dark hair and kind eyes. He was dressed simply, as befitted a traveler, and when he straightened up and looked at her, his expression was one of wonder. "You're even more beautiful than I imagined," he said softly. Rapunzel felt her cheeks flush. "And you are real," she whispered. "I was half afraid you were a dream." They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window and lighting up the golden fall of Rapunzel's incredible hair. "May I?" the prince asked, gesturing to the chair by the table. "Oh, yes, please sit," Rapunzel said, suddenly remembering her manners. She sat on the edge of her bed, and for a moment they simply smiled at each other, both a little overwhelmed by the strangeness and wonder of the situation. Then they began to talk, as they had talked before, but now it was different. Now they could see each other's expressions, could watch each other's faces as they spoke. The prince told her more stories of the outside world, and Rapunzel listened with rapt attention, sometimes laughing, sometimes looking wistful. "I wish I could see it all," she said at one point, looking toward the window. "The ocean and the mountains and the cities. I wish I could walk freely under the open sky." "Perhaps someday you will. Tell me, how did you come to be here? Why are you locked in this tower?" And finally, Rapunzel told him. She told him about the enchantress, about being brought to the tower as a young girl, about the daily visits and the years of isolation. As she spoke, the prince's expression grew more and more troubled. "This is not right," he said when she had finished. "You should not be kept here like this. You should be free." "But how?" Rapunzel asked, spreading her hands helplessly. "There is no way out except the way you came in, and the enchantress comes every day. If she found out about you, if she knew I had been speaking with someone else—" She didn't finish the sentence, but they both understood. The enchantress's anger would be terrible to behold. "Then we must be careful," the prince said. "I will come only when I know she will not be here. What time does she usually visit?" "In the morning, always in the morning, soon after sunrise." "Then I will come in the afternoon," the prince decided, "and I will bring my rope each time and take it with me when I leave, so there will be no evidence of my visits." They talked for hours that day, until the sun began to set, and the prince knew he needed to leave before it grew too dark to travel safely through the forest. When he prepared to depart, climbing back out the window and descending the rope, he paused and looked back at Rapunzel. "May I come again tomorrow?" he asked. "Please do," Rapunzel replied, her heart already aching at his departure. "I will count the hours until you return." And so a new pattern emerged in Rapunzel's life. Each morning, the enchantress would come, climbing up Rapunzel's hair as she always had, bringing food and supplies, staying for an hour or so before departing. Rapunzel would greet her as always, careful to show no sign of the secret she now carried in her heart. Then, each afternoon, the prince would come. He would throw up his rope, and Rapunzel would pull it up and secure it, and he would climb to her window. They would spend hours together, talking and laughing, sharing stories and dreams. The prince began to bring her gifts, small things at first, a ribbon for her hair, a sweet cake from the castle kitchens, wildflowers he had picked on his ride through the forest. Each gift was precious to Rapunzel, who had never received presents from anyone except the enchantress, and those had always been practical things, never given with affection. As the weeks passed, their affection grew into something deeper. The prince found himself falling more and more in love with this remarkable young woman who had spent her life in a tower and yet remained so kind, so curious, so full of life and hope. And Rapunzel, who had never known love before, discovered that her heart was capable of feeling things she had never imagined. One afternoon, as they sat together by the window, the prince took her hand in his. "Rapunzel," he said softly, "I must tell you something. I have not been entirely honest with you about who I am." Rapunzel felt a flutter of worry in her chest. "What do you mean?" "I am not just a traveler. I am actually a prince. My father is the king of the realm to the south of this forest." Rapunzel stared at him in amazement. "A prince? Truly?" He nodded. "I did not tell you at first because I wanted you to know me as just a person, not as a title, and I wanted to know you the same way. Does it change anything, knowing this?" Rapunzel thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No," she said, "you are still the same person who has been kind to me, who has told me stories and brought me flowers. Prince or traveler, it makes no difference to my heart." The prince smiled with relief. Then, taking both her hands in his, he said, "Rapunzel, I have fallen in love with you, completely and utterly. I know your situation is complicated. I know there are obstacles before us, but I want to be with you. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife?" Rapunzel's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you too, more than I knew it was possible to love anyone." They embraced then, and when they finally drew apart, they began to make plans. "We need to find a way to get you out of this tower," the prince said. "I could bring a ladder, perhaps, or—" But Rapunzel shook her head. "A ladder tall enough to reach this window would be too heavy for you to carry through the forest alone, and if you brought others to help, the enchantress might discover us." They sat in thoughtful silence for a moment, and then Rapunzel had an idea. "What if you brought me silk thread?" she said. "Strong silk thread, a little at a time. I could weave it into a ladder myself. The enchantress would not think anything strange of my requesting materials for my weaving. It would take time, but eventually I could make a ladder strong enough to hold my weight and long enough to reach the ground. Then, one night, I could climb down and escape." "That's brilliant," the prince said, his face lighting up. "I will bring you the finest silk thread I can find, and when your ladder is complete, I will be waiting below with a horse for you. We will ride to my father's castle, and there we will be married, and you will never have to be locked away again." From that day forward, the prince brought Rapunzel silk thread every time he visited, the finest and strongest he could acquire. Rapunzel hid it carefully, and whenever she was alone, she worked on her ladder. She wove the silk thread carefully and tightly, creating a rope that was both strong and light. Slowly, slowly, the ladder grew. The work required patience and care, and sometimes Rapunzel's fingers ached from the delicate task, but she persevered, motivated by her love for the prince and her desperate desire for freedom. Each addition to the ladder brought her one step closer to a new life. But secrets, especially secrets of the heart, are difficult things to keep, and sometimes even the most careful plans can unravel with a single careless word. It happened on an ordinary morning, several months after the prince's first visit. The enchantress arrived as she always did, calling up to the window in her commanding voice. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel wound her hair around the hook and let it fall from the window, then braced herself for the weight of the enchantress climbing up. She had done this thousands of times over the years, so many times that it had become as automatic as breathing. The enchantress climbed steadily, hand over hand, her weight pulling at Rapunzel's hair. And perhaps it was because Rapunzel's mind was on the prince, who had visited just the day before, or perhaps it was because she had grown careless with happiness, but as the enchantress neared the top, Rapunzel said without thinking, "You are so much heavier than the prince, it takes him no time at all to climb up." The words were out of her mouth before she realized what she had said. Her hands flew to her lips, her eyes widening with horror as the enchantress's head appeared at the window. The old woman's face had gone very still, very cold. She climbed through the window and stood before Rapunzel, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet and deadly. "What did you say?" I didn't mean," Rapunzel stammered, backing away. "The prince," the enchantress said, her voice rising. "You spoke of a prince? How long has this been going on? How long have you been deceiving me?" "I wasn't trying to deceive you," Rapunzel said, tears beginning to stream down her face. "He heard me singing and he came to find me, and we talked, and I was so lonely and I—" "Silence!" The enchantress's voice cracked like a whip. "I took you in. I cared for you. I kept you safe here where nothing could harm you. And this is how you repay me? By sneaking around behind my back? By allowing some stranger into your chamber?" "He is not a stranger," Rapunzel said, finding courage from somewhere deep within. "He is the man I love, and he loves me. He has asked me to marry me, and I have accepted." If the enchantress had been angry before, this declaration transformed her rage into something terrible to behold. Her eyes seemed to glow with fury, and her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You foolish, foolish girl. Do you think he truly loves you? Do you think he will still want you when he discovers what you are? You are nothing but a stolen child, taken as payment for a debt. You have no family, no lineage, nothing to offer a prince." "I don't care about any of that,"
Rapunzel said, her own anger rising now, "and neither does he. We love each other, and we are going to be married, and you cannot stop us." The enchantress laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Ha! Oh, my dear child, you are about to discover how very wrong you are." She moved suddenly, crossing to where Rapunzel kept her few possessions. With quick, angry movements, she began searching through the chest at the foot of the bed, through the shelves, behind the spinning wheel. And there, hidden carefully beneath a pile of wool, she found it, the silk ladder, still unfinished, but already quite long. The enchantress held it up, her face twisted with rage and something that might have been hurt. "So this was your plan, to escape? To leave me after all I have done for you?" "You imprisoned me," Rapunzel cried. "You locked me away from the world. How can you be surprised that I want to be free?" For a long moment, the enchantress stared at her, and Rapunzel thought she saw something like pain flicker across the old woman's face. But then it hardened again into cold fury. "Very well," the enchantress said quietly. "If you will not stay willingly, then I will ensure you have no choice." She moved to the window and looked down at Rapunzel's hair, still wound around the hook, still hanging down the side of the tower. Then she drew from her robes a pair of scissors, their blades glinting in the morning light. "No!" Rapunzel screamed, understanding what the enchantress intended. She lunged forward, trying to stop her, but the enchantress was too quick. With swift, violent movements, she grabbed Rapunzel's hair and began to cut. The golden hair, 20 ells long, cultivated and cared for over all the years of Rapunzel's life, fell away in great coils. Rapunzel felt each cut like a wound, felt her connection to her one means of freedom being severed forever. When it was done, Rapunzel's hair hung in short, jagged ends just below her shoulders. The enchantress gathered up the cut hair, coiling it around her arm, and then she turned back to Rapunzel with eyes that held no pity. "And now you will learn what it means to defy me." She began to weave a spell, her hands moving in complicated patterns, words in an ancient language spilling from her lips. The air in the tower grew thick and strange, and Rapunzel felt magic pressing against her skin like a physical force. When the enchantress finished her spell, she pointed one finger at Rapunzel, and the young woman felt herself being lifted off her feet. The room around her began to dissolve, the familiar walls and furniture fading like mist. "You want to see the world?" the enchantress said, her voice echoing strangely. "Then see it. I banish you to the wilderness, to the farthest reach of the desert, where no one will ever find you. There you will live with your choices, alone and forgotten." And with that, Rapunzel felt herself being pulled away, the tower disappearing around her, replaced by swirling darkness. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. She reached out for something, anything to hold on to, but there was nothing there. When the world finally solidified again around her, Rapunzel found herself lying on hot sand under a merciless sun. She was in a desert, just as the enchantress had said, a vast expanse of nothing but sand and rock stretching in every direction as far as she could see. She was utterly, completely alone. Meanwhile, back at the tower, the enchantress stood in the empty room, holding the coils of golden hair. Her anger had faded, leaving behind something that felt uncomfortably like regret. But she pushed it aside. What was done was done. She used her magic to secure the cut hair to the hook by the window, letting it hang down the side of the tower just as it had when it was still attached to Rapunzel's head. Then she settled in to wait. She did not have to wait long. Just as the sun was beginning to set, she heard a voice calling up from below. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair!" It was the prince. The enchantress's face hardened. She lifted the golden hair and let it fall from the window, watching as the prince eagerly began to climb. When his head appeared at the window, his face was bright with anticipation. But when he saw not Rapunzel but the enchantress waiting for him, that brightness turned to confusion and then to fear. "Where is she?" he demanded, climbing the rest of the way into the room. "Where is Rapunzel? What have you done with her?" "Your precious Rapunzel is gone," the enchantress said coldly. "She has been sent away to a place where you will never find her, her punishment for her betrayal." "Betrayal?" The prince's voice rose in anger. "She has done nothing wrong. The only wrong here is what you have done, keeping her locked away all these years." "How dare you?" the enchantress hissed. "She was mine. I took her. I raised her. I cared for her. She belonged to me." "She belongs to no one but herself," the prince shouted. "Tell me where she is. Tell me, or I swear I will—" "You will what?" the enchantress interrupted, her voice dripping with contempt. "You are powerless here, boy. You have lost her. Accept it and go." The prince looked at her with eyes full of rage and anguish. "I will find her," he said. "I don't care how long it takes. I will search the entire world if I must, but I will find her." "Then you will search in vain," the enchantress said. She raised her hands, and before the prince could react, she released her hold on the cut hair. The prince, standing at the window and still holding on to the hair, suddenly felt it go slack in his hands. His eyes widened with horror as he realized what was happening. He tried to catch himself, to grab the window ledge, but it was too late. He fell. The enchantress watched from above as he tumbled down the side of the tower. He crashed into the thorn bushes that grew thick around the tower's base, and his cry of pain echoed up to where she stood. She felt no satisfaction in his fall, no joy in her revenge. She felt nothing at all as she turned away from the window and used her magic to transport herself away from the tower, leaving it empty and abandoned. At the base of the tower, the prince lay among the thorns, pain shooting through his body. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the anguish in his heart. As he had fallen, several thorns had struck his eyes, and now as he struggled to arise, he realized with growing horror that he could not see. The world was dark. He was blind. He whispered, "Rapunzel," her name a prayer on his lips. "Rapunzel, where are you?" But there was no answer, only the whisper of wind through the thorns and the fading light of a day he could no longer see.
In the desert, Rapunzel struggled to survive. The first days were the hardest. She had never known hunger like this, never known such thirst. The sun beat down mercilessly during the day, and at night the temperature dropped until she shivered despite the warmth of the sand that retained the day's heat. But Rapunzel had spent her entire life solving problems, making do with what she had. She had learned patience in the tower, learned to endure, learned to find small joys in difficult circumstances. These skills served her now. She walked, not knowing where she was going, but understanding that staying in one place would mean death. She walked until she found a small oasis, a place where water bubbled up from beneath the sand and palm trees provided blessed shade. Here, she made her camp. She learned to find food in this harsh landscape. She learned which plants were safe to eat and which would make her sick. She learned to catch small creatures for meat. She learned to weave palm fronds into shelter and clothing. The months passed,
and Rapunzel survived. But survival was not the same as living. Every day she thought of the prince. She wondered if he had returned to the tower, if he had found it empty, if he was searching for her. She wondered if he thought she had abandoned him, if he believed she had changed her mind about marrying him. As time went on, Rapunzel began to notice changes in her body. At first, she tried to deny what they meant, but eventually she could no longer ignore the truth. She was with child, the prince's child. The realization filled her with a complex mixture of emotions: joy, because this child was made from their love; fear, because she was alone in the wilderness with no one to help her when her time came; sorrow, because the prince would never know he was to be a father. She prepared as best she could. She gathered soft materials for the baby, wove blankets from palm fronds, found a sheltered spot where she could give birth in relative safety. When her time came, Rapunzel gave birth alone, with no one to help her but herself. The pain was terrible, worse than anything she had ever experienced, but she endured it, and when she finally held her newborn in her arms, she wept with joy. It was a girl, tiny and perfect, with eyes as blue as Rapunzel's own and a faint dusting of golden hair on her head. "I will call you Dawn, because you are my hope, my new beginning." But the next day, as Rapunzel held her newborn and tried to nurse her, she felt another pain, different from the first, but just as intense. To her amazement and terror, she realized she was having another baby. By the time the sun set that day, Rapunzel had given birth to twins, Dawn and her brother, whom Rapunzel named Haven, for he was her safe harbor in this wilderness. Caring for two infants alone in the desert was perhaps the hardest thing Rapunzel had ever done. There were times when she didn't think she would survive, times when she was so exhausted she could barely move. But whenever she looked at her children, at their tiny faces and grasping hands, she found the strength to continue. Meanwhile, far from the desert, the prince wandered. After his fall from the tower, he had dragged himself away from those terrible thorns, blind and in anguish. He wandered through the forest, guided only by the sound of running water when he found streams, the feel of the sun on his face to tell him which direction was which. He called Rapunzel's name over and over, hoping against hope that she might hear him, that she might answer. But there was never any response. Other travelers found him sometimes, and they would ask him where he was going, what he was doing stumbling through the forest blind and alone, but he could never explain properly. How could he tell them he was searching for a young woman who had been imprisoned in a tower? How could he make them understand the depth of his love, his desperation to find her? Some travelers took pity on him and led him to villages where he would rest for a few days before setting out again. He could not stay still. He had to keep searching, keep moving, keep hoping that somehow, someday, he would find her. Years passed this way, years of wandering, of hoping, of calling her name to the empty air. The prince's family had long since given him up for dead. His father, the king, had mourned him, had searched for him, but eventually had been forced to accept that his son was gone. The kingdom moved on without him. But the prince himself could not move on. Even as his clothes grew ragged and his face became weathered from years of exposure to the elements, even as people began to mistake him for a beggar rather than a prince, he continued his search. In the desert, Rapunzel's children grew. Dawn and Haven were bright, curious children who brought joy to their mother's life even in this harsh place. Rapunzel told them stories, taught them to read using a stick to write in the sand, sang them the same songs she had sung in her tower. She told them about their father, about the brave and kind prince who had loved her. She described his face to them so they would know him if they ever saw him. She promised them that someday, somehow, they would find him and they would be a family. The children listened to these stories with wide eyes, trying to imagine this father they had never met, this world beyond the desert that their mother described. 5 years passed this way. Years of Dawn and Haven were 5 years old enough to help their mother gather food, old enough to have their own small tasks around their desert home. It was on a day like any other that things changed. Rapunzel had taken the children to the edge of the oasis to gather dates from the palm trees. She was singing as she worked, one of her favorite songs, her voice carrying across the desert air. And by chance, by miracle, by the working of fate itself, a blind wanderer heard that song. The prince had been walking through the desert for days, drawn by some instinct he couldn't name. He was thin now, his face gaunt, his hands calloused from years of feeling his way through the world. His clothes were little more than rags, and his dark hair was shot through with premature gray. But when he heard that voice, that beautiful, unmistakable voice singing a melody he had heard so many times in a tower room years ago, he stopped dead in his tracks. "Rapunzel?" he whispered, afraid to believe, afraid to hope.
He called out louder, "Rapunzel!" At the oasis, Rapunzel froze. She knew that voice. Even after all these years, even changed by time and hardship, she knew that voice. "Stay here," she told the children, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She ran toward the sound, her feet flying over the sand. "Rapunzel!" the prince called again, turning toward the sound of running footsteps. "Rapunzel, is it really you?" And then she was there, throwing her arms around him, holding him close, tears streaming down her face. "It's me," she sobbed. "It's me. It's really me. You found me. After all this time, you found me." The prince held her as if he would never let go, his own tears falling freely. "I searched everywhere," he said. "I never stopped searching. But your eyes, Rapunzel, I cannot see. When I fell from the tower." Rapunzel pulled back just enough to look at his face, and when she saw his eyes, unseeing and scarred, fresh tears fell. She took his face gently in her hands, and as she looked at him, her tears fell upon his eyes. And whether it was magic, or the power of true love, or simply the mystery of the universe working in ways we cannot understand, as those tears touched his eyes, the prince felt something shift. The darkness that had surrounded him for 5 years began to lift. Shapes formed, blurry at first, and then clearer. He could see Rapunzel's face, older now, weathered by years in the sun, her hair short and no longer the golden rope it had once been. But she was still the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "You healed me," he whispered in wonder. "Your tears healed me." They stood there for a long moment, just looking at each other, hardly able to believe they had found each other again. Then Rapunzel remembered. "I have something to show you," she said, taking his hand. "Come with me." She led him back to the oasis, where 2 small children stood watching with wide, curious eyes. They looked so much like Rapunzel, with their golden hair and blue eyes, but he could see traces of himself in them too, in the shape of their faces, in their expressions. "These are children," Rapunzel said softly, "your son and daughter, Dawn and Haven." The prince felt his knees grow weak. "Our children," he repeated. He looked at Rapunzel, then back at the children. "All this time you've been alone, raising them by yourself?" "I survived," Rapunzel said simply. "We survived. And now we found you, and we can finally be together the way we were always meant to be." The prince knelt down in the sand, and the children approached him cautiously. "Hello,"
he said gently. "I'm your father." Dawn, who was slightly bolder than her brother, reached out and touched his face. "She said you would come," she said. "She said you would find us someday." "Your mother was right," the prince said, pulling both children into his arms along with Rapunzel. "And now that I have, I will never leave you again. Never." The journey back to civilization was long, but they made it together, a family at last. The prince brought Rapunzel and their children to his kingdom, where his aged father wept with joy to see his son returned from the dead. The king welcomed Rapunzel with open arms, and when he learned all that she had endured, all that she had survived, he declared that she was the bravest and most remarkable woman he had ever met. The prince and Rapunzel were married in a ceremony that the whole kingdom attended. Dawn and Haven stood beside their parents, their faces shining with happiness. The enchantress was never seen again. Some said she had died of grief and regret for what she had done. Others said she had simply disappeared, vanished into the same magic she had once wielded so freely, but no one knew for certain, and in time she faded from memory like a bad dream upon waking. Rapunzel never forgot her years in the tower, nor her years in the desert. They had shaped her, made her who she was, but she did not let them define her. Instead, she used what she had learned to help others. She became known throughout the kingdom for her kindness and her wisdom. People would come to her with their problems, and she would listen with patience and understanding, drawing on her own experiences of hardship and hope to offer comfort and advice. The prince, for his part, never took a single day with his family for granted. He had lost years with Rapunzel, had missed the birth of his children in their early years, and he was determined to cherish every moment he had with them now. Dawn and Haven grew up strong and happy, loved by both their parents and their grandfather, the king. They learned to read and write, to ride horses, to dance and sing. But they also learned from their mother the values of patience and endurance, of finding joy in small things, of never giving up hope even in the darkest times. As for Rapunzel's hair, it never grew back to its former length. It stayed short, barely reaching her shoulders, but she didn't mind. It was easier to manage this way, she would say with a smile, and besides, she had no need anymore for hair long enough to serve as a ladder. She had her freedom now, and that was worth more than all the golden hair in the world. Years later, when the old king died peacefully in his sleep, the prince became king and Rapunzel became queen. They ruled wisely and well, known for their compassion and their justice. They never forgot what it was like to suffer, to be lost, to be alone, and so they governed with empathy for all their subjects, especially those who were struggling or afraid. In their castle, there were no towers with locked doors. Every room could be entered and exited freely, and in the gardens, roses grew in abundance, tended carefully by the queen's own hands, a reminder that beautiful things can grow even after the hardest winters. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Rapunzel would stand at a window and look out over the kingdom. She would think about the girl she had been, locked in a tower, looking out at a world she thought she would never see. And she would think about the woman she had become, forged by hardship into someone stronger than she had ever imagined possible. And she would smile, knowing that her story, which had begun with such sorrow and isolation, had ended with love and family and freedom. The children who grew up hearing the story of Queen Rapunzel would often ask her to tell them about her adventures, and she would gather them around and tell them about the tower, about the desert, about the long search and the joyful reunion. But she always ended the story the same way.
The most important thing to remember, she would say, is that even in the darkest times, even when hope seems lost, you must hold on. Keep singing your song. Keep believing that better days will come, because they will. They truly will. Your happy ending may not look the way you imagined it, but it will come, and it will be real, and it will be yours. And as the children listened, their eyes wide and wondering, Rapunzel would look at her husband, at her children grown tall and strong, at the life she had built from the ashes of her captivity, and she would know that her words were true. Sometimes the wait is long, and the path is hard, and the journey takes you through thorns and deserts and years of wandering. But if you hold on to love, if you hold on to hope, if you keep putting one foot in front of the other, even when you cannot see where you're going, eventually you will find your way home. And they all lived, if not happily ever after in the simple way of fairy tales, then happily enough in the complicated, beautiful way of real life, with challenges still to face, with sorrows still to endure, but also with love to sustain them, with family to hold them, and with the freedom to choose their own path forward. And that, really, is all anyone can ask for. And so we come to the end of Rapunzel's story, a story of towers and wilderness, of separation and reunion, of holding on to hope when everything seems lost. As you lie here now, warm and comfortable in your bed, I hope you can let Rapunzel's journey remind you of your own strength, your own resilience. Whatever towers you may feel trapped in, whatever wilderness you may be wandering through, remember that better days are ahead. Take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. Feel your body relaxing deeper into the comfort of your bed. Your limbs are heavy, your breathing is slow and steady, your mind is quiet and peaceful. If you're still awake, that's perfectly fine. Just let yourself drift, floating on the gentle current of sleep. If you wake during the night, remember Rapunzel standing at her window. Remember the prince searching through the forest. Remember that persistence and patience always lead us home. Rest now, sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with golden light and happy endings. Good night.